glow of the chandelier reflecting in her wine glass. The smell of roasted chicken and jollof rice filled the air, mixing with faint jazz music playing in the background. It should have been an ordinary family dinner, just her husband Kweku, and his parents. But Amelie had a feeling tonight would be different. Kweku's parents had recently lost their home. His mother complained about rent, his father sighed about retirement, and Amelie listened quietly, offering polite smiles while Kweku tried to comfort them. Everything seemed normal until, between spoonfuls of soup, Kweku cleared his throat and said proudly, "Amelie and I have decided. You'll move in with us next week." Amelie's fork froze midair. Her heart thumped once, then steadied. She placed her fork down gently and smiled, calm as ever. "That's wonderful," she said softly. "But before we make it official, maybe we should tell them who actually owns the house." The table went silent. Kweku blinked. His mother frowned. "What do you mean?" she asked sharply. Amelie reached into her handbag and pulled out a folder. "I mean," she said, sliding the paper across the table, "I bought this house myself before we got married." Kweku's parents stared at the deed with her name written clearly on it. Their faces drained of color. The room that once buzzed with chatter now felt like a courtroom. Amelie leaned back, her voice calm but firm. "So if you move in, it'll be as my guests, not my husband's." No one said a word. The music kept playing, soft and slow, as Amelie picked up her fork again. Dinner back on track, respect finally restored. The evening breeze from the streets of Accra drifted through the open windows, carrying the smell of fried plantain and jasmine. Zuri had spent all day preparing dinner: spicy goat stew, yam balls, and sweet palm wine, hoping tonight would go smoothly. Her husband Kwabina's parents were visiting, and as always, she wanted to keep the peace. Zuri had rebuilt this home from the ground up, her late father's land, her sweat, her design. Every wall carried her touch as an architect, and as a daughter keeping her father's memory alive. But Kwabina's parents never saw it that way. To them, she was just the young wife who got lucky. They arrived with fake smiles and loud voices, complaining about how hard life had become since losing their house. Zuri stayed polite, pouring drinks, asking about their health. But she noticed how her mother-in-law's eyes moved around the house, judging, measuring, claiming. Dinner went on until Kwabina cleared his throat. "Zuri and I talked," he began, flashing his mother a reassuring smile. "You'll move in with us. She's fine with it." Zuri's spoon clinked against her plate. She took a slow breath, her heart calm. "Of course," she said sweetly. "The guest house out back is ready for staff." The room froze. Kwabina's father frowned. His mother looked confused. "Staff," she repeated. Zuri stood, walked over to the TV, and picked up the remote. With one click, a video appeared on the screen, security footage from the day before. It showed her mother-in-law in the backyard, sneering at Zuri's housekeeper. "Some people forget their place," she said in the clip, "working in another woman's house as if it's hers." The room went silent except for the soft hum of the ceiling fan. Zuri turned back to them, her voice calm and steady. "That's why I built the guest house. Small, separate, quiet. It's for those who understand respect and boundaries." Her mother-in-law's face turned red. Kwabina looked down, ashamed. For the first time, he truly saw how much Zuri had endured. The gossip, the insults, the disrespect, all while building a life that carried them all. Zuri smiled gently. "You're welcome to stay," she said, "but only if you understand it's not your home. It's mine." As she cleared the dishes, the silence around the table said everything. Kwabina finally realized that love means nothing without loyalty, and respect is something you earn, not demand. The Nairobi sunset painted the sky gold as Tandy set the last plate on the dining table. It was her first time hosting her in-laws, and she wanted everything perfect: roasted chicken, ugali, sukuma wiki, and soft music humming in the background. She'd spent hours preparing, hoping tonight would be peaceful. But deep down, she knew her husband's parents never came without drama. Ever since she married Jabari, they had looked down on her. "Just a nurse," they'd say, as if her job of saving lives wasn't good enough. They came from an old money family, always reminding her that their son had married below his level. Tandy never responded. She simply smiled and worked harder. Dinner began with polite small talk. Jabari's father complimented the meal with a tight smile, and his mother complained about their landlord increasing rent again. Tandy listened quietly. Then, as she reached for her glass of juice, Jabari cleared his throat, a proud grin spreading across his face. "Actually," he said, looking at his parents, "you don't have to worry about rent anymore. You can move in with us." Tandy agrees. The words hit her like a slap. She froze for a moment, her hand trembling slightly. Then she smiled, calm, graceful, and steady. "That's wonderful," she said softly, reaching for her handbag resting on a chair beside her. "But before we make that decision, let's go through some papers." The laughter around the table faded. Jabari frowned. His mother's smile stiffened. Tandy unzipped her bag and pulled out a crisp brown folder. She laid it on the table and slowly opened it, revealing neatly arranged documents. "This," she said, sliding the top page forward, "is the house deed." Her voice was gentle, but every word carried weight. "It's fully paid, registered, and owned by me." The silence was thick enough to cut. Jabari's parents stared at the papers. His mother blinked twice, then looked up, her face pale. You bought the house?" "Yes," Tandy said with a calm nod. "Before the wedding. I wanted us to have a home that was truly ours. So if anyone moves in, they'll need to understand whose roof they're under." Jabari's father cleared his throat, his pride collapsing in front of him. His mother's lips trembled, searching for words that never came. Tandy stood, gathering her plate with quiet dignity. "Dinner's over," she said softly. "Lesson served." She walked out of the dining room, her head high, her steps steady, leaving behind a table full of silence and a room that finally understood who really held the power. The dinner in Johannesburg started out like any other: polite smiles, clinking plates, and hidden tension thick enough to choke on. Naledi had spent years being polite to her husband's family. They never liked her, never thought she was good enough. She wasn't from money, and they made sure she never forgot it. But Naledi had learned the art of quiet power, listening, smiling, and remembering everything. That evening, her husband Seppo was in his best mood, trying to impress his parents. He talked big about his job, his success, and their beautiful home. Naledi sat beside him, quiet but observing, as his mother bragged about how Seppo was the one holding the family together. Then came the moment that changed everything. Seppo cleared his throat, smiling proudly. "My parents will be moving in with us next month. It'll be good for everyone." Naledi looked up slowly, her eyes soft but sharp. Then she laughed, not mockingly but gently, the kind of laugh that made everyone uneasy. "Which house are you talking about, Seppo?" she asked sweetly. "The one I bought before I met you, or the one you rent under your name?" The room froze. His father's fork dropped onto the plate. His mother blinked, confused. What do you mean?" Naledi turned to them calmly. "Seppo didn't tell you. When he lost his job 2 years ago, I used my savings to clear his debts and register this house in my name. I didn't want to embarrass him, so I stayed silent." Seppo's face turned red. "Naledi, that's not." She raised her hand softly. "No, Seppo. You've spoken enough tonight." Her voice wasn't angry. It was calm, graceful, and final. His parents looked stunned. The woman they'd called unworthy had been the one holding their son's world together all along. Naledi stood up, her chair sliding back quietly. "You all thought I'd stay silent forever," she said, her tone firm but elegant. "But silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it's just patience, waiting for the right moment." With that, she picked up her glass of water, took one calm sip, and walked away, leaving the entire table drowning in their own shame. The dining room sparkled that evening in Abuja. Golden light bounced off the glass table Aisha had decorated herself, every detail carefully chosen: candles, orchids, and soft jazz in the background. It was meant to be a peaceful dinner, a small celebration for her husband Malik's promotion. His parents were the guests of honor, smiling and pretending to like her cooking while secretly judging every bite. Aisha had learned to play along. She was an interior designer, calm, composed, and always 3 steps ahead. Malik's parents never liked her independence. They preferred a wife who stayed quiet and obeyed. So Aisha smiled, listened, and said little, even as she noticed the secret glances between Malik and his mother. Something was brewing. Dinner went smoothly until dessert, her homemade coconut pudding, Malik's favorite. That's when he put down his spoon and announced with fake confidence, "I've decided my parents will move in with us next week. It'll be good for everyone." Aisha froze just for a second. She had suspected this. The late-night whispers. The sudden repairs he'd asked for in the guest room. She had waited for this exact moment. She smiled sweetly, clapping her hands softly. "That's wonderful news," she said. "Actually, I already took care of it." Malik blinked. Took care of what? She reached into her handbag and slid a folder onto the table. "I rented an apartment for them, fully furnished. 6 months paid in advance." The room went still. His parents exchanged confused glances. Malik's voice dropped. "You what? I knew you'd planned something like this," she said calmly, opening the folder. Inside were signed lease papers, keys, and photos of a lovely 2-bedroom apartment near their favorite mosque. "I wanted them to have their own space, comfortable, private, and close enough to visit." His mother's jaw tightened, embarrassment flooding her face. Malik just stared at his wife, realizing she had predicted his move before he even made it. Aisha leaned back, her tone warm but sharp. "You handle promotions, Malik. I handle life." She picked up her wine glass and smiled, the picture of grace and quiet power. The candles flickered, the silence thickened, and everyone understood. She was always 2 steps ahead. Signed, sealed, and served cold. The night air in Kampala was warm and still when Imani lit the last candle on the dinner table. Her home looked perfect, elegant, peaceful, and filled with a quiet scent of grilled tilapia and cinnamon tea. It was supposed to be a calm evening, but deep down she knew it would turn into something else. Her husband's parents were coming over, the same people who had once called her a nobody for not being born rich. Imani had married into the Nsabuga family, powerful, proud, and always looking down on her. But life had changed. Her father-in-law had lost his company after a bad investment, and suddenly, the family that used to ignore her was smiling again, pretending to love her cooking and her kindness. As they sat around the long wooden table, the conversation turned to how family must support each other in hard times. Imani listened silently, her face calm, her hands folded neatly on her lap. Then her husband, Kato, cleared his throat. "We've decided," he said proudly, "that my parents will move in tomorrow. It's only right." The room went quiet. Imani's eyes lifted slowly, meeting his. "Move in?" she asked softly. "Into this house?" His mother smiled smugly. "Yes, dear. There's more than enough room." Imani stood up slowly, her chair sliding back against the polished floor. Her voice stayed gentle but firm. "That won't be possible," she said. Everyone stared. "What do you mean?" Kato asked. She picked up her wine glass, took a calm sip and said, "Because this house was just sold." Silence fell. His father's hand froze midair. His mother blinked rapidly. "Sold? To who?" Imani placed her napkin neatly on the table. "To me," she said, her lips curling into the faintest smile. "I bought a new place, a mansion actually. It's where my children and I will be moving tomorrow." Kato's mouth opened, then closed. His parents looked at her like they were seeing her for the first time. Imani glanced at her watch. "Dinner's over," she said softly. "I have a new home to prepare." She walked away gracefully, the sound of her heels echoing against the marble floor. Behind her sat 3 people who finally realized. The woman they underestimated had just outgrown them all. The evening sky over Cape Town glowed orange as Sile placed the last plate on the dining table. The house smelled of roast chicken, buttered potatoes, and soft vanilla candles. It was family dinner night, something she'd agreed to only for her husband Daniel's sake. His parents were coming, and she already knew what to expect: fake smiles, polite voices, and quiet judgment. Sile had learned to keep her grace. She was proud of who she was, a woman from a small township who had built her own design studio from nothing. But Daniel's parents never saw her success. They only saw her accent, her background, and the fact that their son had married beneath his class. Dinner started peacefully enough. His mother complimented the meal but couldn't resist small jabs. "You've come a long way from those simple dishes, dear." Daniel just smiled awkwardly, pretending not to notice. When dessert arrived, Daniel suddenly cleared his throat and smiled at his parents. "Mom, Dad," he said proudly, "we've decided you'll move in with us. There's plenty of space." The words hung in the air like smoke. Sile's hand froze on the spoon. She smiled softly, her tone calm but sharp. "That sounds fine," she said, "but only if they follow my rules. No insults, no gossip, and no disrespect." Everyone laughed. His mother chuckled, waving her hand. "Oh, Sile, you're so dramatic." But Sile didn't laugh. Instead, she reached for her phone, tapped a button, and set it on the table. Suddenly, the room filled with familiar voices. Her accent sounds so unpolished. Daniel could have done better. She tries too hard to fit in. It was his mother, recorded loud and clear from a recent visit. The laughter died instantly. His mother's face drained of color. His father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Sile's voice stayed steady. "This is why I have rules. I've worked too hard to be treated like a guest in my own home." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Mom, is this true?" His mother couldn't answer. She just grabbed her purse and stood up, tears of embarrassment filling her eyes. His father followed, muttering an apology as they walked out. Silence filled the room once again. Sile looked at Daniel, her eyes soft but firm. "A partnership," she said, "means protecting each other, not watching while they tear one of us down." Daniel nodded slowly, shame washing over his face. That night, as the door closed behind his parents, he finally understood what true strength and true partnership really looked like. The night air in Nakuru was cool, and the dining room shimmered under soft golden lights. McKenna had spent the whole day preparing for this dinner, not because she wanted to impress anyone, but because she wanted peace. Her husband Otis's parents were coming over, and whenever they did, things always turned into a show. McKenna was the quiet strength in the family, the one who kept the bills paid, the children cared for, and the home running like clockwork. But her husband loved attention. He always wanted to look like the perfect son, especially in front of his parents, who never truly respected her. They thought she was just the simple wife who should be grateful to live under their son's roof. The dinner started with polite laughter, stories, and fake compliments. Otis's father bragged about how nice it was that McKenna managed to keep things tidy. McKenna smiled through it all, her eyes calm and unreadable. Then, halfway through dessert, Otis cleared his throat and said proudly, "Mom, Dad, I've decided you'll move in with us. There's plenty of space, and McKenna's fine with it." McKenna's spoon paused in her hand. She looked at him slowly, her expression soft but firm. "Oh," she said, "you made that decision." His parents smiled, already imagining themselves in the guest room. But then McKenna reached for her phone, unlocked it, and tapped a few times. "Actually," she said, turning the screen toward them, "you'd need my permission for that." On the screen glowed a digital copy of the property deed, bold letters reading owner, McKenna K. The room went silent. Otis blinked in confusion. His mother leaned forward, squinting at the screen. This house is in your name." McKenna nodded gently. "Yes. I bought it before the wedding. I just never mentioned it. Didn't think it mattered until now." Otis's jaw tightened, but no words came out. His parents looked humiliated, their earlier pride melting away. McKenna stood, her tone calm but final. "I don't mind guests," she said softly, "but I decide who lives under my roof." She smiled politely, picked up her glass of juice, and walked away, her quiet power filling the room louder than any argument ever could. The evening was calm in Port Harcourt, the smell of pepper soup and fried fish filling the air as Ebel set the table. She had always been a woman of quiet strength, sharp-minded, elegant, and patient. A successful lawyer with her own firm, she rarely raised her voice, even when her husband's family pushed her buttons. Tonight, they were all gathered for dinner. Her husband's parents had come from the village, smiling a little too wide, pretending to be polite. They had never liked that Ebel was a lawyer. Too bold, they used to say. Too opinionated for a wife. But since their finances had fallen apart, they'd suddenly become sweet and humble. Ebel noticed but said nothing. The dinner went smoothly. Laughter, food, small talk. Then halfway through the meal, her husband Duce wiped his mouth with a napkin and said proudly, "My parents will be moving in with us for a while, just until things get better." Ebel paused, setting down her fork slowly. "Moving in?" she asked calmly. His mother nodded eagerly. "Yes, dear. Only for a short time." Ebel smiled faintly. "That's fine," she said softly. "But they'll need to sign the tenancy agreement first." The table went silent. Then everyone laughed. Her husband chuckled nervously, his father shaking his head. "Ah, Ebel, you lawyers joke too much." Without saying a word, she reached into her handbag, pulled out a crisp brown folder, and laid it neatly on the table. "I'm serious," she said, sliding the papers toward them. "This property was legally converted into a company guest house under my business name. Every occupant needs to be registered, for tax and insurance purposes." Her husband froze. His mother's smile vanished. His father adjusted his glasses, scanning the documents with trembling hands. There was in bold Ebel and Company, legal guest house, registered owner, Barrister Ebel Chakuma. Ebel leaned back, her tone gentle but unshakable. "I built this home from my work, every tile, every brick. So if anyone wants to live here, they'll follow the same rules as every other guest." The silence that followed was heavy. Her husband stared down at his plate, realizing just how far ahead she was. His parents quietly gathered their things, faces red with shame. As Ebel poured herself a glass of water, she smiled faintly. Respect, she thought, had finally met reality. Dinner was supposed to be peaceful that night in Dar es Salaam. Tari had just come home after a long day at her clinic, exhausted but proud. She was the one who paid the bills, bought the groceries, and kept the lights on. Her husband, Daniel, always said he was managing things, but no one ever saw what he was actually managing. Still, Tari stayed quiet. She didn't like drama. That evening, the dining table was full. Daniel's parents had come over, smiling and pretending to care. Tari served them ugali and stew, smiling politely while they talked about how a good wife takes care of everyone. She listened, biting back the urge to laugh. Then, right in the middle of dinner, Daniel cleared his throat and said proudly, "My parents will be moving in with us soon. They'll help you around the house." The room went still. Tari put down her spoon and looked at him, not angry, just calm. "They can move in," she said softly, "after they sign the lease and pay the deposit." His mother blinked. "Lease? Deposit?" Tari nodded, still smiling. "Yes. This house isn't a family home anymore. It's officially registered under my clinic as staff housing. Anyone staying here must sign a tenancy agreement. It's company policy." Daniel's face turned pale. "Tari, what are you talking about?" She pulled out a neatly folded document from her bag and placed it on the table. "I'm talking about ownership, Daniel. You remember when I took that loan to build my clinic? I added this property to it. Legally, it belongs to my business now." The table fell into stunned silence. Daniel's parents suddenly looked uncomfortable, glancing at each other. Tari stood up gracefully, her voice calm but final. "Not in my house," she said quietly, then walked away, leaving behind the sound of her husband's